Okay, greetings and welcome to another Pan-African community news update. I almost forgot the name of the program for today. My name is Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu. Today's date is the 9th of June 2024, and I'm in the studio with Sister Oleander. Hopefully you can hear her okay. Sister Oleander, are you with us?
Yes, I am indeed. Greetings to everybody.
Greetings, everyone, indeed. As ever, you're watching live. You should be able to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. So if you are hearing us now, please, as ever, can you just send us a message? Let us know that you can see and hear us okay. It always helps us just to have some kind of feedback. This is the last program for a bit of a while. So it's going to be a jam-packed one. We're really just covering the news of everything that's happened over the last fortnight, but it'd be good to have you with us on this, our last journey for a little while. As ever, don't forget to subscribe, to hit like, and to share this as well with anyone you think you may find the information useful. I'm going to keep going because we've got quite a lot to go through. And as ever, we're going to start this section with libations to those that recently passed and mention any notable anniversaries. So, as we go. Now, the first we remember libation is to our elder Ras Cosmo. Some of you will know him as Elder Heracuti, who joined the ancestors on the 18th of May of this year. Now, he's known quite widely as a presenter on Afiwe Station or Galaxy, but he was also a teacher, a Rastafari warrior, activist. Some will know he was a composer. His knowledge of jazz was excellent. But most important of all, he was a respected elder in our community. I do know there's actually a GoFundMe online for him. So if you want to contribute to a celebration of life, then please, type it into Google, celebration of life for Ras Cosmo Laidlaw, also known as Elder Heracuti. It should come up. You can make a contribution. His passing is quite a tragic one. He always made me feel welcome whenever I was in the studio. He was a lovely and wise elder, and many of us will miss his transitioning. May the ancestors be pleased with his work. We remember. Now, we don't have many other libations for this week. When I say libations, I know that some people have passed. I know there are people who have joined the ancestors, but unfortunately we haven't had much sent to us, and that's the challenge. It's only as we were connecting to Facebook I saw some, but there just wasn't enough time to kind of share them, and it's only when people send them directly to us that we put them on the program. So what I do have is a few notable anniversaries that we should remember. So one of the ones I want to highlight is something that happened many years ago in 1975. In fact, I say many years ago. It's not actually that long ago if you really think it through. But I just want us to remember that Britain, France, and the United States used their United Nations Security Council veto to stop a proposed arms embargo against South Africa. That's the Boer regime that was practicing apartheid against our people there. Now, 2 years later, the so-called Commonwealth leaders, and those are African leaders on the continent and people around the world, issued a joint statement warning the apartheid regime that if they didn't drop their practices, then there would be bloodshed. And this led to a catapulting and change of things that happened. And eventually it took a long time for the freedom to happen with elder and now ancestor Mandela to come out. It's a very long story. But what I just want to remind you of that history is that several thousands of people joined the anti-apartheid movement march on the rally in the 17th of March in 1963, and you can see them in the image. And they were demanding this arms embargo. And it's really important that I remind us of this, because you might be thinking, that sounds quite familiar if you're starting to think, where are we hearing someone saying stop the arms? And America and Britain, this time not France, is actually putting a veto against that. So that's what's happening now. Anyway, the main speaker at that rally in 1963 was the Labour Party's new leader, Howard Wilson. He told the Conservative government at the time, act now and stop this bloody traffic in weapons of oppression. And like I said, the rest we know eventually became history. But at that time, it wasn't he did. It was a conservative politician, Edward Heath, who who kept on pushing this forward. He lifted the embargo, and in 1970, or from the late 1970s, the Boer regime in Azania developed its own nuclear weapons with the help of West Germany and Israel. This is a tragic state of affairs, but it's very important to know the history, because often we forget this history. It's not the first time that we've seen Britain and the United States, in this particular case, it was also France, use their Security Council veto at the UN to stop a proposed arms embargo. So we remember this history. The next piece of history is from 1921, and many of you may have heard the term Black Wall Street and think this sounds like a really positive initiative. Why don't we hear about it now? What happened? What stopped it? Well, for those of you who don't know, in 1921 there's around 11,000 African Americans who resided in a place called Tulsa. Now, this was a self-contained community. They were self-sufficient. There were African-owned grocery stores, libraries, banks, motels, cinemas, and it was like I said, schools, everything. It was completely African-owned, and it was a safe space as far as could be. We were thriving as a community. But then on the 1st of June, a mob of Euro-Americans began a rampage through the 35 square blocks, and they decimated the community, and they were armed, they rioted, they were deputized by the local police. And I need to make that clear as well, that they were running with the permission of those in authority at the time. They burnt down businesses, homes, schools, churches. It was a white supremacist onslaught. Hospitals, public library, newspaper offices, and homes, and it became known as the Tulsa Race Massacre. There was around 36 people who lost their lives. Some say it might have been as high as 300, but we know at least 10,000 people were left homeless. That's right, 10,000 people were left homeless. Now, being a nerd, you may have seen, you might have heard me talk about that series, The Watchmen. So there was a recent series called The Watchmen, I think came out in 2020, and it covered some of this history. It was based on this real history of Black Wall Street, or the Tulsa Race Massacre. So it's very important to know this history. If you're not familiar with it, then watch The Watchmen or watch the many documentaries on it. But I want us to remember, because like I said, it existed and it can exist again. This whole idea of being self-sufficient is such an important message. It petrifies so many people who have ill intent in their minds and in their hearts. But we remember. And the last we remember for this section, considering the story and history I just shared with you, is that of Marcus Messiah Garvey, who joined the ancestors at the age of 52 in 1964. He was born on the 10th of June 1940. Is that right? No, he left in 1940. My apologies, I got my dates wrong there. Some of you will know that the famous leader was born in Jamaica. He sought to unify African people from across the diaspora. While in America, he became a famous, in fact, I say famous, a legendary activist. He founded the Negro paper. Sister Oleander, sorry, let's see, is there something you wanted to? I can't hear. No? Okay.
No.
Okay, sorry, that must have been my bad. Okay, so he founded a Negro World newspaper, the shipping company called the Black Star Liner, and the UNIA, which stands for the Universal Negro Improvement Association. This was an amazing accomplishment. You can read the works of Baba Tony. Oh my God, my brain's got Tony Martin. I can't believe I'm getting older. Tony Martin has written some amazing works, books documenting his history. This is what he did in America when he was when he moved to the UK in 1935. He led debates at a Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. It's a famous place for those of you who don't know it, which is a spot where people come together and engage in public discourse and debate, and it's still running to this very day. So we just want to remember, because, like I said, 10th of June 1940 is anniversary of his passing, and we remember. Okay, so that's the last libation for that section. We remember. Sister Oleander, I can see you with us now.
Yes. So, as we've come to the end of that one, I thought I'd share some greetings. So, FPCom sends her greetings and
Greetings.
blessings. Reparation
Greetings.
Nation sends greetings. And Mr. the 4-3 says, "Good evening, Dr. Toyin. Respect to Amy Jacques Garvey and Amy Ashwood Garvey too."
Greetings, and a very point well said, because often what happens is that the contribution of what they refer to as the two Amy's is often kind of not recognized, and yet they had a major part and contribution in their own right to Garvey's legacy. In fact, I would go as far as to say that he would not have achieved the amazing works that he did without either of his two wives. And so Amy Jacques Garvey and Amy Ashwood Garvey are amazing. I think our sister C has written a book about that, and also Sister Queen Nzinga has written books about the contribution of the two Amy's as well. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with their legacy, please check those books out and make sure that we are always making sure we recognize and value the contributions of everyone in the Pan-African movement. Thank you for that. Okay, so let me move on. You are watching Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. I'm glad to hear that some of you are with us, and hopefully that means you can see and hear us okay. If you're watching live, you're welcome to interact like everyone else has just had with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful. And now the next section is going to look at domestic news affecting our community. And this is stories that have come over the last couple of weeks. It's the last program for a while, so please, you are really welcome to make comments, questions, contributions as well before we sign off. So the next story, unfortunately, is a tragic one. This is the story of our sister Keisha Christodoulou, who unfortunately joined the ancestors after Leon Murray took her life. I don't want to say stabbed her, but that's what happened. He stabbed her. Part of the viciousness of the story and part of the mundanity of it all is what we don't always recognize, that he stabbed her 17 times before changing his clothes and going on to school run to pick up their daughter. And now we know this because it's the testimony that's come out through the court. From the history we know now is that she had told Leon Murray, who was 35, she was 32, that she wanted to end the relationship. And then the day afterwards, she was murdered by him in her home in Deptford. Now, this took place in November 2022. He's admitted killing her, but claimed diminished responsibility at his murder trial, what took place at Wood Green Crown Court. He told the school when he went to pick up his daughter, he told the staff it's done, and that he had ended Keisha. Those were his words, he'd ended her. The staff quickly called 999, and he apparently did so as well, telling the police what he had done before he was arrested. It's a horrific story. I don't like it when people use the claim of diminished responsibility, because those of you who know me know I'm very sympathetic to those of us who suffer from mental health issues and sometimes are engaged in activities or find that overwhelmed by emotions and actually need help to prevent us harming ourselves or harming others. This doesn't sound like that. This doesn't sound like that at all. Someone who can coldly stab his partner 17 times because she has said that the relationship is finished, pick up the daughter, doesn't sound like someone who's got diminished responsibilities. It sounds like an excuse. But I don't know what the facts of the story, but I'm just sharing it with you. In light of that, the next story is really about some new figures that's just been released that shows that African women in London are disproportionately affected by femicide. And for those of you who don't understand or are not familiar with the term femicide, it's a term used to describe a hate crime that specifically targets women or girls because of their gender. Now, this data came from 2023, and it shows that African women made up 62% of the total femicides listed for that year. What can I say? I mean, some of the women affected includes Johanita Dogby, 31, you can see in the image, who was fatally stabbed in Brixton on Bank Holiday Monday, and Leanne Gordon, who was shot dead in Hackney in December 2023. African women are becoming victims of violence. We often hear at this term, victims of violence against women and girls, but we don't often hear the focus on how it's disproportionately affecting African women. This is something as a community we need to be aware of, and we need to put measures in place to protect our sisters from that, because often the violence is also coming from men within our community. The next story is a tragic one, and this is it's an ongoing story actually, because this is the story about an abandoned baby who's been named Elsa, and Elsa is actually the third newborn baby to be abandoned by their parents. I say abandoned or deserted, we don't know. You know, I mean, you know, I think Elsa was found in Hackney this time. There, you know, it's just an awful situation. We don't know what's going on. I say it's the third child because DNA tests were done, and they found out that baby Elsa is a sibling of two other babies, a boy and a girl, who were found in similar circumstances in 2017 and 2019. Now, despite appeals by the Metropolitan Police, their parents have not been identified, so we don't know what the situation is. We don't know who they are, why they're going through this. We don't know if they're what kind of help they can need. But the babies have been found. I mean, when I say newborns, I'm not saying baby, but they are newborns. I think Elsa had an umbilical cord still attached when they found her. They've been found in freezing cold conditions in parks and in spaces. You know, anyone who knows who they are, or you know, specifically the mother as well, you know, they clearly need some kind of help. I know they're going to be frightened about repercussions, but you know, if you do know them, please, please, please reach out to them, because this is the third baby. If they hadn't been found, I don't even want to think what would happen. They're literally newborns, but for a mother to do this 3 times in a row with 3 newborns says that there's something serious going on. Okay, the next story is a plea from the mother of Yusuf Sonko, who was murdered in 2017. Now, this occurred when he was shot with a single bullet when he stood with a group of friends in Toxteth, Liverpool, like I said, in June 2017. Now, 8 men have been arrested, but no one has ever been charged over his killing. He was a A-level student. His mother is obviously still grief-stricken. She said a lot of people in the community know who was responsible for his murder, but they haven't given her justice. She wants someone to speak up, to come out. The police have said there are certainly several eyewitnesses at the time, and they hold vital information that could unlock the case, but they had not come forward. No one's come forward. Now, there is a suspect who's currently serving a prison sentence in Spain. The police have looked at judicial processes to speak to that person, but you know, they can't really comment on that. So the mother is just saying, please, whatever you can do to bring me justice for my son, 18-year-old student, please, please, please come forward. The next story is a story for our sister Amber Jumlin, who states that her babies, the toddler and baby, were rushed to hospital after they become violently ill when insecticide was used by pest control contractors in her flat, nearly killing them. Now, her children are aged 1 and 3 years old. They were rushed to hospital, like I said, by ambulance after the 11th-month boy, Shiloh, and his 3-year-old sister, Shafia, suffered some serious seizures. They were vomiting, throwing up. She found them coughing, collapsed on the floor in the flat. She couldn't understand what's happening. She tried to make them better. It wasn't working. You know, this happened after insecticide had been used in her flat. They were rushed to hospital. I think they went into a coma at one stage. Thankfully, they've now recovered, which is the good news. But she is, you know, really upset. They've been in this temporary accommodation, Grand Heights Tower block, since September 2023. They moved into there after she felt sexually harassed at the previous shared temporary accommodation, which was provided to her by Redbridge Council. So we can only keep our eye on this story. Thankfully, like I said, the children have recovered, but there's something to be said about this insecticide being used. The company that did it said that they've never come across this before, but the doctors told the mother that it looks like this is likely to have been the cause of their illness. It's a horrible story. The next story is similar to one we spoke about previously. This one is where a father has got some kind of justice for the loss of his family, not a son in this case, but his wife, Fatuma Hydra, and daughters Fatumi and Naima, who are aged both 1 and 3 years of age, which is the same age as the children in the previous story. But in this particular case, the children did lose a life because their neighbor, who you can see in the image, Jamie Burrow, started a fire deliberately in their house by pouring petrol through their letterbox in November 2022. Now, Barrow, who was 32 at the time, lived next to the neighbor in Nottingham. He was convicted on 3 counts of murder last year, and I think we did cover this briefly. He was found to deliberately set the house alight with fuel from his motorbike while they were sleeping, and he watched the fire take hold for several minutes. I mean, there's no doubt he knew there were people inside there. Now, he was initially sentenced for life with a minimum of 44 years, and that's where the story ended. Well, that's what we thought. Now, the reason why the father is so angry is because the legal representation for Barrow kind of appealed that sentencing, and it was reduced to 38 years. Now, the person who goes by the name of Lord Justice, I don't like using those titles, Singh, I don't have his full name, and the other so-called justices, Jay and Mayo, described the original length as manifestly excessive in the circumstances of the case. Now, that's very difficult reach because the original sentencing judge found that he had shown no remorse. He knew that they were, in the house. He didn't make any efforts to get them out. And so when the Court of Appeal said that they felt it was unreasonable and not at odds with the evidence to reduce it, it's very difficult to make sense of that. Now, like I said, he has still got 38 years to serve. But can you imagine, and I feel it for Abu Bakr Drame, who's the husband, to deal with the fact that the murderers of his family has had his sentence reduced. So hence he's calling the UK justice system as racist, because he believes that this would never have happened if he hadn't been of African heritage. And I think he's got something to answer. I think there's something there in that claim. Whew. The next story, we have touched upon this in many cases. Those of you who know me well will know that one of the reasons why I don't have any love for Keir Starmer is because he's one of the people who blocked Legali's investigation into the war criminals who we identified and was seeking to bring up on charges and get arrested for their crimes in Kenya during colonial times. So Keir Starmer blocked that when he was head of Director of Public Prosecutions. But we now know, after all those years, that finally, and this is not for those crimes that Legali was investigating, but finally there is a public inquiry into human rights violations of African people by British troops in Kenya in more recent times. And they've just heard this heartbreaking testimony from those who were mistreated. And that includes the story of Chama Musi, who was hit by a truck and abandoned with horrific injuries in 2019. You can see it in the wheelchair in the image on screen. It's also, I want to make the point that you have noticed that this has not been highlighted in any of the mainstream UK news outlets. There's a little story on the BBC website, but nothing else. Dozens of people this week have been given evidence to a parliamentary inquiry into this misconduct of soldiers from the British Army. They were called a BATUK, which is British Army Training Unit Kenya. The testimony has come from people who have suffered serious health problems from a 4-day blaze, which left the person dead. And they believe, the people who suffered from this, they believed it started by British soldiers during a training day exercise in 2021. And the inquiry has also, well, I don't know if it's covered it, but it's also important to recognize it was actually also prompted by the case of Agnes Wanjiru, and that's the sister you can see on the right of the screen. We definitely covered her story. She's a 21-year-old whose body was found dumped in a tank in 2012. She had been spotted with a group of British soldiers at the time. I think someone had kind of like what's that word? Admitted it, the crime when it came back to the UK. There's still no justice for that, but Kenyan's Directorate of Criminal Investigation has opened up an inquiry into that particular death, but unfortunately no one's been charged. So the UK has said it would not oppose any requests for a suspect to be extradited, but whether that's going to happen, we don't know. So like I said, this is an ongoing inquiry. Just because it's not being covered by the mainstream media doesn't mean it's not happening, but we need to know what's going on. And yeah, it's an outrageous affair. And this is, like I said, it's not dealing with colonial times, just dealing with more recent times of British soldiers just up to misconduct and abuse on their training in Africa while they're there. I mean, this is not, we remember, we spoke about the tragic, it was a missing person of Gilo Moriziva. I apologize if I've incorrectly pronounced his name. The 2-year-old who entered the water, he fell into a river with his family on the 18th of February. We knew there was a massive search operation involving specialist teams. The police said they were going to scale back. There was an outcry. The police decided not to, which is really good. I don't know if I should say good news or bad news. It's certainly tragic news, but the police in Leicestershire have found a body. It's been recovered. They're going to do formal identification. It's likely to be him. All we can do is send our condolences to the family and friends. It's a horrific story. The next story is one that reverberates with something that goes back into Legali's past, when we've seen the abuse of African people in stores not run by African people in Birmingham. Well, we spoke in the last program about what happened with Elder Minka in Brixton. Well, there's been something similar that's taken place in Birmingham. And you may not have heard this on the national news. Again, the mainstream news is not covering this story, but this is the second set of community protests that have taken place. It happened yesterday, this protest outside of Birmingham shop. And if you don't know the background, DJ Warren G, who's a presenter on a popular radio station up there, his pregnant girlfriend and sister were racially assaulted and attacked on the 17th of May. And this is following a minor parking dispute. I think they asked, the girlfriend to move the car. He came out and said, yeah, we'll move it. And then they couldn't wait and they started attacking. And what happened was that his girlfriend, who's 14 weeks pregnant, was struck in the back of the head, needing hospital treatment. Now, this has caused outrage in Birmingham, and one of the local activists, Bishop Dr. Desmond Jadu, said, look, we need to deal with this. On the 17th of May, we know there's a guy outside shopping. He parks outside a shop. It's owned by Kurdish and Iraqi community in the high street of Edrington. They came to him, asked him to move his car, and he said, okay, give me a minute. And they came out with a torrent of abuse, basically calling him a black, be this, and N-word that, N-word that. And they set upon him, some 30 of them with weapons. And we now know yesterday, this is really new, yesterday, that someone at the protests from the shop allegedly called or said the words, I don't speak monkey. This is kind of their comments to talk about us as African people. Outrageous state of affairs, second week in a row the protests are taking place. Now, the police have arrested 5 men aged between 20 to 25. They've been arrested on charges of violent disorder and racially aggravated assault, and they've since been released on bail. I don't know what else is happening. There's lots of people talking about the problem with community leadership in those communities when it comes to dealing with Afrophobia, because people will talk about anti-Semitism, they talk about Islamophobia, but Afrophobia just is off the radar. I think it's partly because we say anti-black racism and no one knows what that really means outside our community. Afrophobia is the proper term, and it upsets people that that it's just not taken seriously. For me, it upsets me. It's not taken seriously. I think this is more of an issue with other communities not knowing the issues that we face specifically, just like we don't recognize miscegenal, which we should do. I think that this is actually also an issue of us as a community not having the level of organization that we used to protect ourselves, to defend ourselves, to articulate our concerns collectively. We've now moved into the cult of celebrity, where we expect those with big followings and those with, kind of like big profiles to talk a lot rather than actually engage and organize and get on the ground and start being present and doing these kind of works. It's very frustrating for someone like me who's come from that background and is now at an age that I don't have the appetite to be tasered anymore, to be beaten up with truncheons anymore, certainly not to put up with people calling me the N-word and stuff like that. But at the same time, there is a need for us to really bring back those grassroots movement. Back in my day, in my time, and many of people in my generation will know what we used to do and what we had to do. We wouldn't let this stand. I'm glad that there were protests, but I think this is something. This is a bigger problem that we need to talk about. I'm not talking about having some charismatic leader, but I am talking about the fact that we need representation again. We need organization again. And it is frustrating me that, ours is the only community where we really seem to have gone backwards and allow other people to lead our defense. It's something that just can't stand. But that's another discussion for another day. Sorry for the rant. This just irritates me a lot. The next story is one that is quite related, not to that particular story, but it's related to an issue that might come up in the future for us, actually. And this is about a tribunal that has ruled recently that mispronouncing someone's name at work could count as unwanted conduct that might violate their dignity. And what that all comes around about to say is that failing to say someone's name properly after being corrected could breach equality rules. And that's really interesting, because if you think about the amount of times that people are, they know they're mispronouncing your name, but they deliberately do it to kind of like to take the mick, to kind of like try and dehumanize you, to try and kind of like point you out as someone who's not quite the same. And for someone like myself who's got traditional African name. So my name, as you know, is Toyin Agbetu. Often people can't be bothered to try and say my name. Those kind of things. Sometimes they're done deliberately. I don't mind when people are trying, but when people do it deliberately, trying to put you in your place, a lot of us had to put up with that. I certainly had to put up with that at school. I've always also had this kind of stuff taking place in higher education. Not anymore. People don't dare do that anymore to me, but it did used to happen. This is a very interesting case because it happens in the workplace. This tribunal ruling says that actually there is a case to answer, and in this particular case, it wasn't an African. It was the person you could see, Vivek Taneja. Let me get that correct. Vivek Taneja. He was awarded £9,000 actually, because he had a case against them. He didn't win all the case, but a particular case about that issue, about racial harassment, because his name was deliberately, I say deliberately, mispronounced by his manager 4 times in a day, meant that the hearing actually found for that. And I think we need to be aware of these situations, not to say that every time someone mispronounces our name that we're going to jump up and call racism and then look for a tribunal, but to recognize that when someone's using something that's natural to us, something that is cultural to us, and they're using it to marginalize us, to demean us, to belittle us, then recognize that actually there is a ruling out there that says that if you correct them and they keep doing it on purpose, then actually there's a chance of actually having a good win with this. At least giving them a bloody nose and getting $9 grand from them if it has to come to that point. So it's just something to keep in mind. And this isn't a human rights issue, even though it is, but this is coming under like an employment tribunal. So it's an interesting story, and I think just something you should be aware of. Okay. Sister Oleander.
Yes. Yeah. So we have a comment from Tafari saying, checking in from Chicago. Thanks again for you all's ongoing and steadfast commitment to our people.
Okay, thanks. And thank you for being with us. We much appreciate the comments.
And just a small comment from me about the previous slide. I also have an unusual name, and went through childhood just being teased a lot, and it was very distressing, very stressful. And because I was so shy, it was hard for me to stand up for myself. But you know, it does a lot of damage internally. And it's only as I got older I was able to embrace my name and, you know, be happy and understand its meaning and all the rest of it. But yeah, out of all my family, mine was the most unusual. So yeah, I completely understand when someone really does it on purpose and doesn't want to make the effort to say your name. So yeah. Anyway,
Thank you for
that's
sharing.
all I wanted to say.
No, it's a good point. It's sometimes an issue of respect, and if you're disrespecting someone continuously and in public with everyone else around them, then you're trying to belittle and dehumanize them, and that's another issue, especially when there's an ethnic component to it. Like, you know, so that makes it, magnifies it. We hear about misnaming or misgendering, which is also an issue. But you know, again, these things are done deliberately. When it comes to doing it on the issue of someone's ethnic identity on a cultural basis, that's quite disgusting, and that's something else. And certainly as a child, the damage can be quite, you know, quite deep. It can
Yeah.
stay with you for a very long time, which I know,
Yeah.
Sister Oleander, that you experienced as well.
Yeah, there's one more comment from FPCom. Sister Oleander, it is a beautiful name too. Oh my gosh, for a beautiful person. Oh,
Oh,
give thanks, sis.
thanks. Okay, the next story. You know, what can I say? At least 150 people, including 35 children, are feared dead, essentially, in a massacre that took place in central Sudan. And this has been blamed on the RSF, that stands for Rapid Support Forces, which is the paramilitary group fighting the army. And many of us are not aware of the issues that are taking place in Sudan. We know there's a conflict going in Sudan. We know it's been going on for at least 13 months. But basically, it's just two rival groups battling for control. But yes, there's a video that's been filmed by activists from a neighborhood resistance committee, and part of it shows, you know, what's been taking place. We know across the country more than 15,000 people have been estimated to have been killed, they've lost their life since the conflict started last April. Now, there have been several rounds of peace talks, but they've all failed to end the war. I wouldn't say conflict, but it's actually now a war, which has basically just happened because two generals have fallen out, one from the army, one from the RSF, and they can't agree who's taking over control. Now, there's an image from the New York Times, which is from today's paper, which shows kind of the levels of extremity, what's happening with people not being able to eat, caused by this conflict. And now on the left-hand side, you can see some of the bodies that are paraded. 150 people, like I said, including 35 children, from a massacre. This is not getting any news coverage. You know, and I know why. I mean, there's the issue. It's dealing with African people, and so there's this whole idea in the minds of the West that if African lives, African people are killing African people, this is not news. Don't cover it. But it's also this whole discourse about anyone who's African is not worthy of being covered. The same thing that we're seeing in Palestine. Anyone who's Arab or anyone who's not European is not worthy of being covered, and their lives are less than. I might talk about, you know, later on, if we have time, about, you know, the ratio, because there's a ratio about what's happened, about how many lives of Europeans are worth to the lives of other people, Africans, Indians, Asians, Arabs. But that's another story for another day. This is just a story that I think we should be aware of, that this is still going on. I'm talking about Sudan. I could also be talking about Congo. I could talk about the strife in Haiti. These are the stories that are not on the mainstream news, just like the case in Kenya is not on the mainstream news, because it's just not seen as important to those who actually commission the stories and choose which stories to make it to the national, national focus. But we have to cover it, at least make a comment so you're aware of it, even though, yes, I know we often feel powerless to be able to do anything about it. We need to know. In some ways, a good news story. It's not a good news story, but like I said, there's a good element towards it. The last program 2 weeks ago, we spoke about these students who have been told that they're going to have to leave the country because, you know, they can't pay their tuition repayments, and Teesside University have reported them to the Home Office. They're going to be deported, etc. And this is because there was a crash in the Naira. It wasn't their fault, but it's an outrageous situation. So 60 students fell behind. And and now we know that at least 75% of the clients in a local food charity or food bank, whatever you want to call it, has been affected, and they're actually being pushed to maximum capacity because these students actually are using their services because they have got no money. They're working second jobs. They're leaving the area they live in, traveling every day to make money to come back to university. So this is going on. They're still trying to find a solution towards this. And they came to the UK under the impression that the fees could be spread across 7 installments, only to be found that the terms have been changed. So they can only do it under 3 installments. This is clearly impossible. One of them's even been forced to sell their home in Nigeria to continue paying their fees so they can meet their debts. It's outrageous. They've been removed from their courses. But, what I say is a good news story. This is something we don't see often, is that delegates from the Nigerian High Commission have come up from London, and they're meeting with the management at Teesside University and telling them, sort this out, do something about it. This is outrageous. This is racist. And this is something that's always bothered me. It's the reason why Legali got set up. I was always worried. I used to watch something called Thunderbirds, International Rescue, and I love this idea that no matter where you was on the planet, you could pick up a radio, anything, and say, help me, and International Rescue, Alan would be in Thunderbird 5 listening, and they would send these people down, and they would find you and help you. And that's the model I had for Legali, right? No matter where you was, if you was in trouble, I was so tech savvy, I would listen out on the internet. We had a forum of 10,000 members at the Heights. I'd listen to everyone, and something came up, we would parachute in and we would help. And part of the reason why I felt the need to do that as a young man, I mean, now I'm an elder now, and I think we still need it, but part of the reason I wanted to do it then is because I remember feeling that we were unprotected in the diaspora. That, I've seen other nations, if you take one of their citizens, then they, other countries will send their army in, they'll send their troops in. You see what Israel does, the wickedness that they do. But there's a point about saying that you're not alone wherever you're on the planet. If someone messes with you, you've got a whole nation behind you. You know what I mean? And I remember thinking as Africans, we didn't have that. And so it's quite nice for me to see this. I mean, the fact that the Nigerian High Commission is actually saying no, and do something about it. And since then, the university, they've apologized. They've said that the affected students are going to get mental health service support. They had individual meetings with them, with specialist staff, and they're trying to find solutions so they can still carry out their job. So they're trying to resolve it now, but that would not have happened if, first of all, we didn't highlight it in the media. And second of all, do you know what I mean? It's like if the High Commission at high political level hadn't stepped in. The last time I felt that level of pride, if I'm really honest, was, and I was a young man, I wasn't even politically aware at the time. It's with, I think it was his name, Manley. When Africans being roughed up in London, I remember Manley came down, he was a Jamaican president at the time, came down to London and he roughed up the political class here. So what are you doing to our people? What are you dealing with? And he roughed them up. And I remember thinking, you know what? That's what leadership is. Even if we're in a diaspora, we need our nations to come in and step in wherever we are. And we just don't see that anymore. Well, this is and this is why I say it's a good news story. It's a bad news story, what's happening to those 60 students, and I'm hoping it's resolved. But it's a reminder of the need for political leadership. We need to have people who have our back. That's something that's missing. So, we'll come to this maybe when we return back after the end. Not this program, we ain't got time for it, but it's a serious issue. Sister Oleander.
Yes, so we have a comment, quite funny. I chuckled a bit. Mr. 43, Thunderbirds being a low-key influence on Legali is something I respect highly.
I should have told everyone that. Yeah, I'm a nerd, right? I'm a nerd. But Thunderbirds was the lick, man. There was nothing they couldn't fix. Nothing. Yep. They could go underwater. They can mount, no matter where you were. They could. And this is, as Africans, I believe that there's nothing we cannot solve. We just got to have the will. Imagine if 10 of the footballers. I mean, I just read a story. It's not on this broadcast. I just read of a couple of African footballers who just bought houses worth £2.3 million, £2.6 million. They just dropped it. They're earning something like 200,000 a week. They just bought these houses. Imagine if 10 of those footballers just made donations to an organisation like Legali. So we could put in place around the UK, Legali centres. So whenever you got trouble, you were never alone. You had legal representation, you had media representation, you had people who come and take after your mental health, your social issues, your culture. Imagine that. But you see what? It's all that each out for themselves, not looking for us as a collective. And this is part of the problem. And I'm just too tired now. I'm too old to be pushing for that. This is something, we have to cultivating the next generation. I'll talk about that a bit later on. But yeah, the Thunderbird things is real. That was the lick. That was an international organization. That's what Pan-Africanism, isn't it? Pan-Africanism is an international, it's a global program, which says that no matter, even if you don't know you're an African, I've got your back. Even if you are one of those clowns from the FBA or ADOS who hate me, I've got your back. You know what I mean? I might not be able to roll with you. Might not be spars, but I've got your back. You're an African. Do you understand? And behind all that is the human rights focus. So we're not going to carry on and rough up other people and other communities who you know what I mean, just because they're not Africans. We don't roll like that. We can't become like our enemy. Sorry, the Thunderbird thing is going to my head now. Let me move on to the next story. The next section, I should say. So you are watching Legality's Pan-African Community News Update. If you're watching live, as you know, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Don't say no more sci-fi references or or comic references, or else you'll trigger me off and the program will go on for like 5 hours. This is the next section is called Politrix. It's about stuff that's taking place around the UK. There's been quite a lot of it going on, but it's not many stories. As ever, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. It's really important to subscribe if you don't subscribe now, because we're going to be off there for quite a while. I'm going to work out what we're going to do between that gap there, but the program will be off live. So this is your chance. If you've got something you want to say, comments you want to share. Okay, let's go. Just Oleander.
Yes. So we have a comment from FP Comms. Share of voice refers to the amount of media coverage one receives within a news cycle. A higher share of voice can significantly enhance our impact. To improve this.
Is that part 2?
No. Maybe she's typing it.
Well, yeah. I'm sorry.
Here it is. Here it is. To improve this, we can invest in advertising and secure subscriptions to our platforms to ensure sustainability. Please continue your comic references.
Okay, well, I'm not sure I'm going to keep those references going, but if they come up where they're apt, I will. But no, you make a really good point. In the absence of having independent platforms with the weight, then we can influence those that are in place, like I say, through subscriptions, through advertising. There's a sister, Melissa Sigodu, I think I've spoken about her, who's a journalist for The Mirror, and she has created something called The Thread, which reminds me of the early days of the Legality newsletter. And she's got a subscription model now. She's doing it anyway because she's a good person, so she's doing it from her heart. But she's got to eat. What happens if one day she's not in that job? And so we can subscribe to her. There are other people on YouTube who they use that for their income. And that's one way of doing it. The only thing I don't like about subscriptions, though, the only thing is that sometimes we get caught up in the more subscriptions you have, the more successful, the more important you are. And I've never been a quantity over quality person. I really do believe that it's far better to have a smaller number of dedicated, trusted, loyal, kind of like consistent supporters. And you know what I mean, than to have a whole lot here for 1 minute and then next minute they're gone to move on to the next fad or whatever's in place. But it's a really good point. The advertising is also important because we can also boycott. There's economic boycotts. There's different ways that we can influence media platforms. If there's a particular like a product or organization that's advertising between a particular program, and then we're aware of that, and that program's not covering a story, and then we say we're going to not watch that program until they do something, or we're not going to buy that product. Again, we have influence, but these things require a level of discipline, and that's something that we have to recultivate in our community, that discipline to be unified on a cause, even if we don't like the personalities involved calling for the cause, to be disciplined and actually following through. And that's something that I've seen erode over time. But that's, again, maybe we need another program specifically for that. I'll play around with that. Maybe I'll play around with that, but thank you for that. These strategies are very important. That's what our history tells us. That's how we had a Black Wall Street. That's how we, before the Tulsa race riots and stuff took place, it was that level of unity of recognizing that actually, look, I'm going to do the cinema. Okay, I'm going to do the bank. Well, okay, I'm going to do the swimming pool. And having all different families kind of doing their thing a little way different, but for one shared vision of creating a safe space of economic prosperity, political prosperity. The only thing we couldn't do was defend ourselves against white supremacists who were coming armed with the power of the local police and the fire and the murder that took place. It doesn't mean we can't do it again. We certainly have the wealth, but the wealth is concentrated in individuals, not in communities like it used to be. And that's the problem. I'm going to keep moving on because of time. So the next story, we're talking about politics. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Most of you are familiar with the story about what's been happening to our sister Diane Abbott. She's been roughed up pretty bad by the Labour Party. We now know that the stuff that where Starmer was running around and he was sending out his cronies saying that we can't interfere with the investigation. We had to wait to see what happens. We now know that he was lying to us. That the investigation he was talking about was completed last December. So he could have made a comment. He could have admitted to the party. So essentially, they were just roughing her up. They were just trying to degrade her, to kind of like embarrass her. Now, it's important to remember that she has been in that post for over 40 years. And, this level of disrespect that's been given to her is, this is the height of what Afrophobia is. They would not have dared done that to someone else. In fact, they didn't. When they had other candidates who weren't of African heritage, they brought them back, but they did it to her. You've got to remember she had a formal warning about her letter to the Observer. The letter, like I said, it was clumsily written. It wasn't even all accurate. There was something stupid about saying that that all groups don't experience racism. She shouldn't have gone there because she was actually wrong in certain aspects. But I understand what she was trying to say. We've covered that before. She was required to complete an anti-Semitism awareness course. I think she did that. But now where's this all landing? I don't want to go on and on about this. There's been a letter that went out by dozens of Africans from the UK who are prominent in leadership positions and media positions. They signed an open letter saying that if Labour doesn't come correct with her, it's going to alienate voters from our community. It's good that they're coming together to do this. Again, I'm very funny about these kind of so-called prominent Africans or prominent Black Britons. It makes me a bit queasy. They don't have the pulse. They don't understand us. They don't feel us. They don't understand why we don't vote. You know what I mean? So these kind of threats don't mean anything. It's like what you need is us to say, you don't come correct, then we will vote for this party. We'll vote for the opposition. There's other tactics as well. In fact, the better tactic is what we did with Legalities when we actually established a political party, the first African British political party in the history of the UK. That was Legali. But I couldn't find the candidates that I wanted or quality who put our people before their own ego. And so I think we dissolved that around 3 years ago, which was a shame because I really wanted to get to a stage where we had representation in Parliament. And I'm just not prepared to do that all over again. It was cost me money and time to keep open, waiting for the right people to come forward. But Diane Abbott is now on the ticket. She's going to stand as a Labour candidate. She's going to run. She's hoping to win. It's unlikely that anything will happen to upset that. And so the story has come to an end. There was this stuff about her being offered a position in the Lords, and blah, 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 but it doesn't mean much now. The point is she can run for Labour and she's likely to win. And that's the end of that. But the whole story really is a microcosm of a bigger issue that we have. We shouldn't be resting our whole political future on one person. And Diane Abbott should really have around her other women, to be honest with you, African women, who are ready to step in and learn from her and carry a baton on it. It shouldn't rest on her and her alone. And I fear that that's happened. I did see that our sister Belle would be Adira, who's an amazing candidate, is actually standing in where is it? Is it Battersea? No, not Battersea. Somewhere in South. I'm really bad with South London. I'm really sorry. I'm an East Londoner. I know she's standing somewhere in South London, and I'm quite happy for that. So there are some good quality candidates. We know Dawn and stuff like that. But there is a bigger problem where we're putting all our hopes on the ones in the Labour Party who have got some kind of integrity. We need to stand on our own feet, which means we do actually need a political party. I'm not saying I'm going to do that, but that's what we really need. And if you want to remind about why it's so important that we need that, we'll take a look at this story. This is brand new. And this is the case of the Home Office now facing yet another scandal in the scale of what they call it the Windrush scandal, but it's a Home Office scandal because we've now known that the Home Secretary acted unlawfully by failing to provide documents to thousands of African migrants, proving that they were there or here in the UK legally. So this again is exactly what happened with our, those of us, our parents and ancestors and people who came from the Caribbean. But this particular case is now slightly different. Like the sister you can see on the image, her name is Cecilia Adeji. She's a healthcare worker, a mother of 2 boys, age 11 and 17. She came to Britain from Ghana in 2000. And just like that, she was suspended from her job. She's a healthcare worker, and they just suspended her without no notice. So she's like, what the hell's going on? And, basically they're saying that, well, you need confirmation that you're allowed to still be here to extend your visa. And she goes, well, this, it's called free sea leave. Give me the document. And the Home Office wouldn't send a document. And so what's happened is that while they've been in limbo, they've been, their job's been at risk. Some of them have lost their job, no money, no access to higher education, to healthcare, can't rent a home. This is the whole thing all over again. And look who's the Home Secretary, right? The Home Secretary is James Cleverly. This is an African. So don't get confused about seeing our faces in power, okay? This illusion of inclusion. It's the same thing with Rishi. These people don't like us. They're as Afrophobic as it comes. Just because white supremacist comes in different shades doesn't mean that it's going to be softer. So this is something that's live. It's just been uncovered. We only know about it because there's a charity called Ramphel who brought a legal challenge, and the challenge succeeded and said that this was an illegal act. I put a quote from what she said, what Cecilia said, our sister. She said, I have 2 children and have to budget very carefully. So we suffered real hardship when my wages suddenly stopped. I had to borrow money and visit a food bank just to get by. It was humiliating and scary. And I didn't have any way to prove my employer that I still had the correct immigration status and the right to work. I'm very happy that the court has made this ruling. Why should she have to be relying on the court to force the government to do something that it's supposed to do in the first place? The government that said it's learning from the Windrush scandal that it created, which it hasn't resolved, which it hasn't provided reparation for which people from our community are dying waiting for reparation for a scheme that was created by another African who's now saying that even the scheme that he wrote isn't implemented correctly. Why is this happening all over again? Why? And I'd say some of the reason why is because we do not have the political weight yet. We've not organized sufficiently again to say that this person is delegitimate. He cannot represent our concerns. None of those who are like him with those kind of thinking can represent our concerns in Parliament, in Westminster. Okay, but this is another big grown-up discussion that needs to happen. So, again, important story. I'll move on. I'm going to tell you why it's an important story and why there is another way. And this is the last story for this section. Because what you may know is that there's an election. I spoke about this. It's taking place in 4 weeks now. And one of the parties that is actually on the ticket is Reform UK. Now, Reform UK is a blatantly racist party, right? Blatantly racist party. And it's basically run by one man, Nigel Farage, and it's financed by one man, Richard Tice. So 2 people have this party. Now, that 2 people running that party are on television every single week. They shape the way that the political discourse in this country goes. Okay, so what I'm trying to say now, I'm not saying that we replicate them because they are racist and we don't need more racism inside the political system in the UK. But what we do need to understand is that it is possible to create a political party. If you've got the right amount of weight behind you, the right amount of resource behind you, you can have a voice that makes changes in Parliament, that challenges the status quo. But in this particular case, in this particular story is, and this is really ridiculous. As the headline says, racist party drops candidates over racist comments. Apologies for the typo, I missed it. I must be falling asleep. And essentially, they found 2 tweets and comments made by 2 of their candidates, and to its credit, the party has actually dropped them. I saw one of the comments on Channel 4 this week, some idiot talking about African people. I'm not even going to say what he said, but basically these people are just typical Reform. One of the things we have to be mindful of is thinking that the racist comments made by these 2 individuals who were Reform candidates are any different from the views of people like Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage, who's now the leader of the Reform Party or Reform UK, is just as racist as they are. Don't ever make the mistake of thinking that he's some kind of like a Tory, Tory radical or whatever. What's happened in the UK is that far-right extremism has actually become normalized. And so, just because some people get caught out, some people actually have a pass to make these comments, and they still end up on Question Time. They still end up in leaders' debates, and if you want any proof of that, I didn't watch it, but from what I've heard, Nigel Farage actually won this 7-way BBC election debate that took place on Friday. And this is coming from a poll that looked at, like I think 1,000 people to get the results from that. More than that as well, like I said, I didn't watch it, so I can't comment on the content, but I know that he's back to pushing even harsher stop and search on migrant communities. And if you think that that's the government's position, that they are advocating harsh stop and search, like it ever stopped, and he's advocating even harsher stop and search, what happens when that kind of tension takes place is that the Tory party or the government start to leapfrog over reform to be even harder, and then Labour go even harder to prove that they are the party of law and order. And so all that happens is that these parties lead jump over with their xenophobia and racism, and then we just get the brunt of that. If they're making policies which are populist policies that don't make any benefit to the UK's economic situation, its culture, its peace, its security, its prosperity, but what it does, it secures power for them. I'm going to move on. Sister Oleander.
Yes, so we have a comment from Mr. The 4-3. I think people do organise, but the energy is put more towards business and money than politically organising.
Sorry, can you say that again, please? I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Mr. The 4-3 says, I think people do organise, but the energy is put more towards business and money than politically organising.
That's a really good point. And you're right. We do organise in economic hubs. And it's very important that we do so. Without economic prosperity or security, then it's difficult to sustain any initiatives that we have. But what I would suggest, and I know it's not going to be popular, is that a lot of us are afraid to engage in politics because we fear that it will affect our economic prosperity. And what we don't seem to realise is that our economic prosperity is directly linked to our political prosperity. It's like the moment we become economically too powerful, then what happens, that becomes a political issue. And so we have to be able to control both of them to be able to do it successfully. Any organization that organizes economically and has a good strategy and starts to gather support automatically gathers political weight. And if they don't look at protecting and nurturing that political weight, that political power, and harness it in a positive way, then they're attacked. That's always been the case. And and so it's like I said, it's another program. It's something else to discuss. I am not the most, when it comes to, I'm an anti-capitalist, right? So I don't really have answers when it comes to economic prosperity. I mean, I do because I've run businesses in the past. I've run 4 record labels. I do actually know how to make money. It's just, I'm more interested in political power for us as a community, so we can actually look after each other, because with that comes the ability to create environments where we have economic stability and security so that we can all eat. And that's a very difficult conversation to have with people, because in a conservative nation like the UK, and be very clear, the UK is a conservative nation, we are still stuck in this thinking me and mine. It's difficult to think in terms of supporting those without, when everything around you is doing that L'Oreal thing, saying that you're worth it, and everyone else should be pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and stuff like that. As African people, that's not our way. We believe in the village, and we recognize that some people in the village, their job is to make money, and they're good at it. They're good at promoting. They're good at manufacturing. Those are the things they're good at. And there's others whose job is to nurture, to educate, to heal, to entertain, to build, to create, all those other things. We're not all supposed to be economically active. And this is one of the things I manifestly hate about the new Labour Party under Starmer, when they say every 15 seconds that they are interested in working British people. Always use that word working as if somehow not working makes you, like not valuable, as if that we can't, as a party, we're not interested in your well-being. Everyone must be working. Well, actually, some people can't work in a way that is seen conventionally. Some people have disabilities, some people have ailments, some people are not supposed, some people have care and responsibilities. So this whole thing about focus on work and economics is part of the ideological problem that we have to deal with. It doesn't mean that we again, like I say, we're not engaged in economics, but we also have to understand it's a part of the political package, not the other way around. Money doesn't come before politics. Politics becomes before money. Sister Oleander.
Yes, so we have a comment from N. Greetings, Bro Toyin. Wow, a deep level analysis. Political, economical, wow.
Thank you. Good, thanks. And this is, I'm trying. Sorry.
And another comment, have you heard of Powernomics by Dr. Claude Anderson, USA? He speaks on the 5 steps for economic change, politics, justice, media, education, and economics.
Oh, Ashe. Yes. Linking them all together. Just that. Thank you. I haven't. And what I'll do, I'll try and, if there's a book or something, I'll try and grab that and have a read. I'll check the details afterwards on when the program's finished and see if I can download that or pick up a copy or something like that. Because yeah, again, we can't separate the two. It's one of the reasons why everyone in this country, not everyone, but most people are prime ministers who've gone to Oxbridge, they've done politics, philosophy, and economics, PPE, because they recognize that you must have an ideological position, which is a philosophy. You must have an understanding of politics, which is how to control the resources that understand to utilize that people use, and economics. They don't just do one or the other. They do all 3, PPE. And I've always, it's one of my dreams that before I become an ancestor, that I institute a model for a community PPE, which is, I call it people, politics, and economics, but there's or perhaps enterprise. But we need something like that, and it needs to start at a very young age. So our young people aren't just focusing on money. This is what rites of passage is. It's not just focusing on the needs of yourself. It's focusing on the needs of yourself, your family, your community. You must know how do you connect to everyone in the community. And without that, we just replicate the environment that's around us and we cause mayhem. Or what happens, we get destroyed by it. Another program for another day. I'm so sorry. But give thanks and thank you for the tips as well. Let me move on and to the next section, which is unfortunately Afrophobia and white supremacy, as if I wasn't talking about that in the first place. Just as a reminder, you're watching the Galley's Pan-African Community News Update. If you are live with us, as some of you clearly are, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Please feel free to drop any book recommendations as well. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful. If you want to keep in touch just over time and stuff like that. I know I do have a Twitter account. I'm not very good on Facebook, but I am there. But the next section is a review of Afrophobia and related white supremacy news from around the UK, even though the next story is actually going to start a little bit afield from the UK and go to Europe. Just in line with what I've just been talking about, those of you who are watching the news and following things that are going on, this week, citizens of all 27 EU member states are voting in the European parliamentary elections. Now you might think, well, what's that got to do with us? We're outside the EU. We're now, because of Brexit, we are a sovereign nation. Yay, we can do what we want, make our own laws. Yay, scrap human rights. Yay, all this kind of stuff. Well, I'm not going to try and convince you why that's a load of nonsense. What I will tell you, and what you need to be aware of, is the exit polls coming straight out from those who have voted right now shows that what they call the far right are making some gains across the whole Europe, particularly in Germany and Austria. And this is despite what they call centre-right alliances making progress and taking the lead, especially in places like Germany. Now, centre-right is kind of what the UK is right now. So if you think about the Conservative Party or the government as a right party, I'd call it an extreme right party, but they would call themselves a right-wing party. And Brexit is far right. They're all extreme rights. And Labour is what they call centre-right. So it means it's not liberal, it's not socialist, but it's centre leaning towards kind of like fascism. Okay, I'm hyperbolic there, but that's where it is. Well, what's happening across the EU is that the likes of Marine Le Pen in France, Giorgia Meloni in Italy, Viktor Orban in Hungary, Karl Wilders in Netherlands, you can see in the images, they're all gaining more power. They're between 15 and 20% of the vote. And you may think, well, 15, 20% isn't that much, but actually when you start getting 20% of the vote, that starts giving you some serious influence over the shape of politics in your country. So this is what's taking place. And I think we need to be aware of this. It's the reason why I still recognize and believe that we need to have our own political party, because what's happened right under our watch is yesterday's far right message is today's normal political discourse. And it's based really on three simple ideas. The first is ethno-nationalist purity. So basically, unless you are racialized as white, you're not quite one of us. Anti-immigrant xenophobia, which is obviously including Afrophobia and Islamophobia. Islamophobia is in the spotlight right now because of the atrocities that are being committed against the Palestinian people. But Islamophobia and Afrophobia are two of the oldest ones. Anti-Semitism is on the rise, but this has been conflated with Zionism, so it's making that a bit messy to talk about. And the last one, which if I had a picture of people like Trump, is anti-establishment populism, which is saying that the political class are kind of like the problem. You need to bring us in, the everyday person, which is the Trumps of the world, the Boris Johnsons of the world, and that will change everything. Well, the reality of the situation is like, if you look at the British system, the leader of the opposition is Sir Keir Starmer. You can't get more establishment than someone who's been knighted. It's madness. So, but this is normal discourse. And it's attractive to those who don't understand politics because it offers the supporters an exclusive identity, right? With simple solutions. Kick them out and everything will be all right. So this is growing across Europe. And even though the UK is actually out of Europe, it will have an influence on Africans here. It's the same thing we're seeing in the Americas. It has an influence all over the world. So we have to be aware. I'm not saying that we don't have, I wouldn't call it far right, but I'd call it kind of like extremism across the continent. I'm not saying we don't have it in the diaspora. The way that certain communities are treated in certain nations in the Caribbean, I'm still not happy with. We do have these traits. All of us have these traits. All nations have these traits. But what we're seeing across Europe is particularly dangerous, especially to us because we constitute in Europe a minority community. Even though globally we may be part of the majority, in Europe we are a minority ethnic group, and that means that we are vulnerable to risk of violence against us. But I'll move on. Just keep an eye on what's happening in the EU elections. That's all I'm going to say. Even if you think it's far away, what happens there impacts us over here. There are some good news coming from Europe, and this is the last one on Europe, just so you just have a heads up. This program, even though it's based on news affecting us in the UK, it's important because what happens across the waters is not that far affects us here. Was that a few days ago there was a football match in Uruguay, and there was a player who was sent off, and the Argentinian coach shouted at the referee, whose name is Javier Ferrez, and called him a negro de mierda, which means you black piece of, and the SH word. And this sort of thing would normally just, very funny, very funny. But actually what happened is that the video caught attention. Something happened. Social media picked it up. It went across the nation and people got vexed. And this wouldn't normally happen in Uruguay. Normally Afrophobia is just, they're just moaning again. But he apologized. He's been sanctioned by the Uruguayan Football Association, and he's actually resigned from the team. So there has been some kind of moving on this. He's also facing investigation by public prosecutors for incitement to hatred. So this is changing some parts of Europe. There's this recognition that the issue of racism in Europe is something that needs to be addressed. So I'm saying that there's this movement of, towards the far right, and that is definitely a real threat. But it's also this counter movement which is recognizing, and it's some of it is from Black Lives Matter. I mean, the movement, the murder of George Floyd and the influence of that. But there's also the others of us saying, like, look, we are part of this nation now. Get used to it. And then people saying, you know what, we are used to it, and we've got your back. So it's not all doom and gloom. I'm not painting like like this kind of like kumbaya, hold our hands across Europe kind of moment. We're not there yet, but I'm just saying this is what took place. Remember, this program covers what's happened in the last couple of weeks. You need to know, because of course the elections say something completely different, but this is what's happening on the ground. Coming back to the UK, then you'll remember we spoke about the racism in NHS. We've covered some of this for quite a while. Well, we now have the story of a nurse, Rhoda Teagle, who is working in trauma and orthopedics ward at the Worcester Royal Hospital when she made some really outrageous and basically epiphobic comments on her Facebook page. She was very vexed with some colleagues on that particular day, and she started talking about them as monkeys and say it's difficult to work with them, and they came from the mountains and jungles. Now, everything she said was a straight out racist. It's on Facebook. She was saying that she didn't mean it to be racist. She was just upset, blah, 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 blah. And thankfully, she has been sacked. And more so than that, the Nursing and Midwifery Council for Fitness to Practice Committee has barred her from the nursing profession. So, this is good news and bad news. The good news is that, action has been taken. The bad news is recognizing that these ideas are still prevalent with people who are employed by the NHS. We see this in the police, but it's not just the police in the UK that have these attitudes. And the only reason why we know about this case is because she did it in public on Facebook. And her colleagues who saw it reported it. People on her friends list saw the comment and reported it. People, that's how we know about it. Normally, these things just stay in WhatsApp groups. And so we don't really know about it until someone's got the courage to say, that's not on. So, just sharing that with you. Moving a little further afield, still UK, this is talking about in Northern Ireland. And our brother, Russ Takui Makoni, who's lived in Northern Ireland for more than 20 years, has been forced out of his Belfast home. And this is due to racist graffiti that's been sprayed onto his property. Now, the reason why he's been targeted is because, like, not too long ago, there was these signs, and you can see the image. Let me just blow that up. You can see the image on the screen, which was just saying things like "Stop housing illegal immigrants," and then telling people to, "We've had enough of undesirables and immigrants being placed into our community." And he just came out and condemned it and said, "Look, these posters are outrageous, and we need to come together and stop it." And because he said that, people are starting to target him personally, saying that he's not welcome in the nation. And again, he's had to leave, and he's fed up. He's been there for 20 years, and he's saying, "Look, I can't cure racism as a person who's a victim of it. So it's up to people to educate themselves. This is time for action, not time to be sitting there with folded arms." And he's correct. This has happened across the UK, but this is a particular story happening in Northern Ireland. And just to make the point that this is continuing to happen, we know also of a story of a care worker living in South Belfast for almost 2 decades. And she said that her teenager and herself are now living in fear at their home because they've been targeted by multiple hate-motivated attacks. Now, she, originally from Nigeria, has had her front windows smashed, eggs thrown at her front door, jelly put through the letterbox. The police have received over 8 reports of antisocial behavior targeting her property in the last 18 months. Can you imagine that, right? That's one every couple of months. And they're treating each of the incidents as motivated by hate. Now, the mother has actually said that her daughter doesn't want to live there anymore, not for another minute, because she's actually frightened. Now, she's been going it for years. She doesn't bother anybody. She pays her tax. She doesn't know why anyone's doing it. She finds it's just terrifying. But she's gutted because her daughter can't even sit by the window. She feels petrified because they broke the window. So now in their own home, they feel under siege. So this is what's taking place in South Belfast for someone who's been living there for 2 decades. So we had someone living there for 40 years, someone there living for 20 years. This idea that, just integrate, and everything will be right isn't quite working out. There are those who will hate us because they're racist, because they believe in Afrophobia and those ideas. And we have to recognize that. And it's not for us to fix that. That's for the political leaders to talk to those in their family who are perpetuating this to deal with it. God, this is the role of business in this issue. We spoke about money and economics. And just to make sense of some of this, is understand that it doesn't just come out of nowhere. So here's a story about what do you call it? A public house called Gunwharf Keys, the old customs house, and they made a verbal agreement to host this statue, which was an image commemorating the West Africa Squadron, which was a Portsmouth-based naval fleet that freed around 150,000 enslaved Africans in the 19th century. I mean, that's how the narrative goes. And they said they'll do it. They saw the statue, which shows Africans liberating themselves. They can see the chains going, and there's representation of the naval fleet. And they've said, "Oh no, hell no! You're not putting that statue outside our building." And and I think the phrase they used was that it lacked sensitivity and authenticity. I mean, I think if they were on the please, master, please free us, they would have been happy with the statue. But the idea of freedom, breaking the chains, so that's how they feel. And so the group that's organized this, I said, we're going to have to find another space. And this is part of the problem that we're dealing with. So, I mean, this is enterprise. It's not local authority. This is kind of like a group asking the business to help out. They don't want to help out. But local authorities can make a difference. And the last story for this section, those of you who live in London, you may be aware that 6 artists have now been shortlisted to create a memorial to the victims of Ma'afa, in London Docklands. They're going to be backed with £500,000 of funding from the Mayor of London. And it's going to be located outside the West India Quays in Canary Wharf. And if you remember correctly, there was, I've forgotten the guy's name, in fact, I don't really care. His statue was taken down. He was a former enslaver. And, so this is going to go in that space there. And the whole idea about this new memorial is that it's supposed to reflect and recognize the role London played in slavery. And it's going to be unveiled in summer 2026. Now, the chosen design is going to be announced later this year. I'm going to say something a bit controversial. Most of you will know that I was a commissioner for diversity in the public realm. So I was on the commission that would have selected kind of like the objects and the choices, and helped shape this program. I'm not, because the Mayor of London stabbed me in the face when they called me anti-Semitic, and I no longer had a part of that process. There's some good people in that commission, but without having someone who's grassroots involved, you get images like this. I'm going to blow it up for you, and I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to be very sensitive here. I know that the majority of the proposed memorials have been designed by African people, and that's a good thing. The majority are by African people, and I love the fact that the wealth has been kept inside the community. But if I'm really honest with you, when I look at the shortlist, none of those images speak to me. Not really. The cowrie shell one, I get the message, I get the point, the reflection steps, I get that. I mean, I get what they're trying to do. But is that I don't know. Is that something that talks to you? I don't know. Doesn't talk to me. But it's a good idea that we have some memorial, right? I mean, this is how it goes. This is art, right? This is how it works, and this is part of the image, right? How we're represented in the public realm is important. Whether we're represented in the public realm. So, if we're represented in a way that is subservient, that's demeaning, that's dehumanizing, that where we lack agency, that is just as problematic as if we're not represented. Sometimes it's better to not be represented. If we're represented in ways that takes away our creativity, takes away our identity, that's also a problem as well. But this is supposedly a good news story. It's £500,000 of funding. I know some artists that Farah Khan, Ken Keller, Kofi Alvin. I mean, there are many, who are amazing artists who could have done something that perhaps would have spoke to our genius, to our brilliance, to our elegance, to our freedom, to our power, to our aspirations. But hey, let me just move on. So just a reminder, you're watching the Galley's Pan-African Community News Update. We're live. You're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Please drop a chat in if you make a comment, if you want to say something. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share. If you find the broadcast useful, sharing is always important. And the next section, I've kept it short, is looking at some policing related issues affecting our community around the UK last couple of weeks. And the first one is really kind of like a reminder, more so than a particular story. It's an update, and it's coming from our elder Neville Lawrence, and he said it's now 31 years since the passing of my son Stephen. 31 years during which I've not, I've witnessed, countless young people being knifed and shot on the streets of the UK, and seen the devastation this has caused on the families of those sons and daughters murdered in their youth. So now he's talking about violence inside our own community as well as that from outside. Now, he's saying from the outset, it was evident that the police were less interested in identifying his son's killer and securing a conviction than they were in positioning Stephen and his friends as potential criminals. And what he's referring to is the fact that when Stephen was murdered, the police were putting plants inside the movement that was seeking justice for the family and were spying on them and trying to find ways to actually move away from finding the truth of who murdered him, which they knew, and actually frame Stephen as some kind of criminal. Now, in April 1993, our elder tells us his life was changed forever. His eventual decision to relocate to Jamaica for most of the year was driven in part by the pain of his loss and feeling unable to walk around the streets of the city where his son was slaughtered. And he uses the word slaughter. He wanted to be near where Stephen was buried and hoped that a return to the country of his birth would give him some kind of solace. So he's put this in there, and he's just saying he can forgive his killers now. He's taken time, he's done the work, but he can't forgive the Metropolitan Police. The sombering message. Sister Oleander.
Yes. So I didn't want to interrupt you, but because FP Comms just said she can't hear you, so I just thought, she obviously wants to hear what you're saying, but okay. I don't know why, sis. I don't know whether it's our end or yours, because I can hear Toyin, and I'm checking on my other devices and I can hear. So I'm not
okay. What might be useful is someone else can give us a check as well to see if you can hear us. Just let us know if you can hear both of us talking. What I'll do, I'll mute and unmute. Okay, I've unmuted, and let's see. Hopefully, that will clear up whatever the problem is. Or you might have to refresh your browser page to bring us up. But thank you for the heads up. Okay. That'll be
okay. Carly says my sound is fine. Black Lives Matter says we can hear you.
Okay, give thanks. I appreciate for the sound check. Okay, sister. So if you can refresh your page, it could be there's something wrong on the particular browser. I'm sorry that you can't hear us. Hopefully, I mean, as you know, we save these, so you should be able to access it afterwards on Facebook and YouTube. But it's good having you with us live. So I'm going to keep going on, but if there's anything else we can do, please let us know and give us updates as well. That would be cool. Okay, thanks, Sister Oleander. Okay, let me move to the next story. And this is one that I want to keep close eyes on because it links to one of my research interests. And this is the story of our brother, Sean Thompson, who works with a group called Street Fathers. Now, he was recently stopped at London Bridge Station during a live facial recognition deployment by the Metropolitan Police. Now, the problem here is that, the software, the algorithm said that he was someone who was a suspect and, identified him positively, but he wasn't the person that it had identified. Now, the police kept him for at least 20 minutes, and he was walking. Not mentioned, he was walking down the street. They nudged him on the shoulder, and after he walked past a white van, and the police were saying, "Look, we're holding you. Who are you? Prove who you are." And he had to hand over a copy of his passport before they'd let him go. So what he's doing, and I want to big him up for this. In fact, I might try and get in contact with him. Is he's launching a judicial review against the police. He's going to say, look, I know how difficult that is, and it's expensive and it takes time, but it's right. He wants to, review their decision about using it, deploying it, and actually stopping them on there. And it's a test case, and I think it's a very important test case because I think I spoke about digital sus, which is kind of like this thing. It's almost like a pre-crime where they are using this technology to identify us without our consent. So it's basically searching us. I mean, not obviously going in our pockets, but it's scanning us without our consent, and then identifying us against lists of people who are convicted criminals or who they're currently seeking. I know it's not popular to challenge this technology because many people will say, if you've got nothing, what's that saying? If you've got nothing to fear, then nothing to hide, and you've got nothing to fear, all that kind of nonsense. Well, here we have a situation with a brother walking down the street and he's been detained for almost half an hour, having done absolutely nothing wrong because technology has picked him up. And similar software to this is what's being used, or was being used in Palestine by the Israeli government, where, what happens was that people would walk past and, depending on how they looked, the software would scan them and the police would stop them. And there's some really good research. Darren Byers has written a really good book on this technology, which was finessed in China during lockdown time. So the Chinese government had created this technology as well. But now, because the UK is outside the European Union, so even though there's an AI Act which is supposed to make some, it's not strong, but some safeguards, we have no safeguards in the UK to this technology. So they can deploy it, they can use it, and there's nothing we can do about it right now. So the only tool we do have is things like judicial review. He said when he was reflecting on the incident, he called the technology flawed and said he felt like he was being treated guilty until proven innocent. They were telling me I was a wanted man, trying to get my fingerprints and trying to scare me with arrest, even though I knew, and they knew, the computer got it wrong. Instead of working to get knives off the streets like I do, they were wasting their time with technology that they knew it made a mistake. And this is really important to check that. People, when the computer says that's the person, many people won't challenge it. They'll assume that the machines are correct because that's the way we view technology. And this is very, very dangerous, and it's impacting us in these kind of horrific ways. But that's another discussion, probably another program for another day. Let me move on from that. Okay, the final story for this section is that of the Metropolitan Police Officer Thomas Murray. Now, he's a member of the Met's Parliamentary and Diplomatic Command. You might have heard about them. They were identified in the Casey report as being this elitist, snobbish, racist, sexist, homophobic unit that thought they were above everybody else. Well, he's been caught accusing African officers of playing the so-called race card during a Teams meeting seminar, which was offering support for underrepresented groups thinking of applying for promotion. Now, you've got to check that, right? So there's a meeting. It's trying to help those who have been discriminated against, saying how you apply for promotion. And so he's going on there kind of like ranting. And he said something along the lines, and this is what other officers have reported. I didn't get an invite to the meeting because I don't tick the box. I'm a white male. And he goes, effing black people. And he continues on with rants along this side. Now, he did not engage with the misconduct process, even though he said that he would fully cooperate, and he's denied his comments were racist or had racist intent. So, this is what's going on inside the Metropolitan Police Force, that, people are resentful of any kind of treatment that helps anyone who's actually facing exclusionary practices. So just having a program teaching African people how to understand how the system works and what to do when it works against them, and giving them kind of support. It could be, in this case, it's African people. It could be someone with a disability. It could be someone who's facing gender discrimination. But he feels because he is a European male that he's been discriminated against, and so that's why he made this outburst. Thankfully, it's other officers who have actually given testimony against him. Metropolitan Police 2024. Let's move on. Okay. Last part of the program, our being positive section. Just as a heads up, you are watching the Galleys Pan-African Community News Update. As a reminder, if you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us. Again, final program for a long time, so please remember you can contact us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. You can subscribe, and I'd suggest you do if you're interested in this kind of content. You can like, you can share it. If you find the podcast or podcasts, I've got a subliminal mind. Maybe I need to do a podcast. If you find the broadcast useful. But this closing section is really just looking at a couple. I haven't got many, but a few positive news stories relating to our community over the past few weeks. I think a few weeks, 2 weeks. And I'm going to start with a lovely romantic story, which I thought was very sweet, which is a care home surprise visit arranged. A care home arranged special date night for 2 residents on their wedding anniversary. And in the photograph, what you can see Pearline Watkins, who's 85, and her husband Robert Watkins, who's 87. And they are currently, well, he is, I should say, resident at the Camberwell Lodge Care and Nursing Home and they made a visit to the Fenchurch restaurant in Monument to celebrate 35 years of marriage. And it was a surprise organised by the care home. And it's quite a sweet story. You can check it out online. And she talks about how it was a bit of a challenge once he became ill and wanted to get home, kind of like just keeping everything going. And so this was a really beautiful story that the care home said, like, let's make the day special for him. And that's what's happened. Pauline, our elder, she says, both of us had been previously married, but when we got together, we began to enjoy the little things in life and traveled to many different places and enjoyed going on cruises. So creating these special moments and continuing to live in the moment is priceless for both of us. And I think that's a really lovely sentiment she's making. It's, any relationship is hard work. You had to sustain it. You had to keep doing things. And it's nice that the care home made this a special day for them. The next story is an award story, actually. So Isatu Jarrett, who's a cardiology nurse and lead of the anti-racism unit in a hospital at Universal Hospitals in Coventry and Warwickshire, was named the winner of the first Michelle Cox RCN Foundation Anti-Racism Award. Now, you can see Michelle Cox in the image. You may remember her from the story in the past where she took on board and challenged the discrimination she faced by her colleagues based on her ethnicity, and she won. And she set up this award because she says that very few awards are specifically for anti-racism, and unfortunately this work often goes uncelebrated. So our sister, I don't have an image unfortunately of our sister Jarrett, but we want to big her up for her work, and she's going to use the funding gained from the award to improve the anti-racism e-learning module, which is given to the staff at the trust. And this is something I have an interest in as well, but that's something else for another day. And then last week, some of you will know that there was an amazing kind of like organized event that took place called Undoing 2007, preparing for 2038. I seem tongue-tied, maybe because I get all shy when I'm involved in it somehow. It was in Birmingham. I was present, and it was organised by my good friend, our brother, Dr. Nathaniel Tobias Coleman. It recognised the Great Deception of 2007. For those of you who are unfamiliar, it's referring to the Wilberforce, and even Wilberforce himself confessed. He used the words, "We are greatly deceiving ourselves when it comes to this rhetoric around Britain being the heroes of slavery." The event was amazing. I was blessed that Sister Oleander came with me. The event was well attended. The wisdom. If I start naming everyone who was present, I've gone for the rest of the night. But there was so many amazing people who spoke, who shared their wisdom and knowledge. I specifically want to acknowledge the fact that it had representations from the Alps Community Development Committee in Jamaica, from Trelawney, formerly New Birmingham. So there was a specific issue made to link Birmingham in Jamaica with Birmingham in the UK. And we heard testimony from the grassroots community, which doesn't normally happen. So, we spoke at different levels, from academia to grassroots to community, and back and forth again. And really preparing for the celebrations that the UK is ramping up for 2038 to celebrate its role in the history of slavery and to twist it. And our brother Nat is doing his best to make sure that we don't have the same kind of nightmare that happened in 2007. So I just want to really just big up everyone who who was involved in that, including the caterers who provide some scrumptious munchies as well. And you also, even though it's not on the slide as well, there was an event yesterday that took place at Richmix, was organised by, I think it was Decolonising the Archives. I've forgotten the name of the event. It was, but I wasn't able to make it. And I'm really gutted because unfortunately I got tied up with work. But again, this is organisations continuously doing work to make sure that the issue of reparations, commemorations, archiving our history, telling it from our perspective, continues to go on. So if you're not familiar with the work of Decolonising the Archive, please check them out. I did get to see their exhibition at the Hackney Archives last week. It's amazing. The exhibition was supposed to be shut down, but they still had a presentation still up on the wall. It was quite heartbreaking to know some of the stories, some of the testimonies, but it's also good to remind ourselves, what we've been through, what we're continuing to go through, and what we have done, more importantly, so to resist it, to find solutions. And we have resisted and find solutions for many, many, many decades. I mean, the work that Brother Nathaniel was talking about is many, many centuries of resistance, but we are continuous in the struggle. So I'm going to leave it there. Sister Oleander.
Yes, I have 2 comments from FP Comms. The first one, if appropriate, the Black Heroes Foundation proudly invites you to an evening celebrating the unforgettable Flip Fraser on Wednesday, June 19th, 2024 at Clapham Grand. Brackets, I know you shared before.
Give thanks. And it is appropriate, so give thanks for that.
And the second comment, finally, I give thanks to you both for the work you all do. Ubuntu, 100%. I'm grateful for all the work you do. I am in part doing what I do because you exist. In all you do, be well. Oh, give thanks, sis.
Thanks, sis. Appreciate that. And yes, Ubuntu. We're doing it because we're all in this together. And that's a really important message to share. This is just our contribution. There are many people who participate, watch, contribute, learn from, share some of the work that we do, and do things in their own different way that help our community, that are invisible. I just happen to be one of those people that some people know my face, but there are others who are doing this work silently, quietly, and making some great progress in our community, and we don't even know their names. And I give thanks to all of them as well, especially our sister as well, FD Comes. Talking about that as well, someone I want to give props to, because we are going to close this program now. It's the last couple of slides. I want to give props to our now ancestor, of course, our brother, or late brother, the elder Lanford Kwesi Garrison. And what can I say? I mean, this is the anniversary of his birth. He was, he was born on the 30th of June, 1953. Our We Remember section really talks about passings, but this is really a celebration of his life, because I've just spoken about the archives, decolonizing the archives and the work that they do. But, we also have others who have done work like that we sometimes are unaware of. And our elder Len, like I said, now ancestor, he came from Nigeria. His parents moved to London in the 1950s. But when he arrived here, he just got on with it. He started training himself, educating himself, and the moment he went through that process, he became a historian, he became a poet. So I've got one of his books of his poems, an amazing poet, an educator, and he became one of the most important figures in Pan-African history in the UK. And most of us don't even know his name. He represented us at Festac in Nigeria in 1977, and that's the Festival of Arts and Culture. For those of you who don't know, you might know the Queen Idia Mask, which was the symbol used to promote it. He set up the African Caribbean Educational Resource Centre in 1977. I think they called it ASA, that was the acronym. And then since 1981, we now know the Black Cultural Archives, or BCA, is something that he, again, was responsible for. We wouldn't have had that without him. I'm one of those people who's annoyed with the name. I know it sounds confusing. It's called the Black Cultural Archives, but actually he didn't call it that. The official name, actually, if you check the Charities Commission, the Black Cultural Archives is actually registered under the African People's Historical Monument Foundation. That is actually its official name. It wasn't supposed to use the term black. And unfortunately, it was betrayed by some of the trustees who didn't quite understand what he was saying when we got to move on and come correct. But actually, the Black Cultural Archives' original and formal name and legal name is still the African People's Heritage or Historical Monument Foundation, because that's the work he did. So I just wanted to big up and celebrate Len Garrison for his works, because many of us are unaware of his contribution. And this is the anniversary of his birth. And then moving slightly across the waters to the other side, to the Americas, I also want to celebrate a name that I haven't spoken about for maybe a few years. I think when we had the Yansapo radio program, I used to always celebrate the works of David Issam. And you might not remember him, but he, in 1958, 66 years ago to this day, actually, he broke the color line in a Florida segregated public pool. He was 19 years of age when he decided, you know what, they say that, I can't swim here, but I'm not listening to this stupidness about segregation. And so he swam there. I think he swam there for like half an hour to an hour, and then he left. And then what happened was that the city manager ordered the closure of the indoor swimming pool, and it remained closed for 4 years because he swam there, because they didn't want to contaminate. The water was contaminated by African skin in the water and stuff like that. And I just love the fact that this young man just said, you know what, I ain't listening to that foolishness. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. So we know about people like Rosa Parks and Clavette Colvin, and we hear about some of the others in America. But actually, David Issam was another young African American who actually just stood up and challenged the color line. Of course, we have this history in the UK, and I'm not for one moment trying to forget the contributions about those of us in Bristol, Paul Stevens, all of those who challenged it. But again, I just want to remind us that it's often young people that are engaging in these kind of acts. And I say that because the last slide, or the penultimate slide, is one where I say we celebrate our young people by remembering that it's actually Youth Month in Azania. And Youth Month has been running for 48 years because it was inaugurated on the 16th of June, 1976, to commemorate the student uprising in Soweto. And that's when 30,000 young people were protesting against the Bantu Education Act, which was forcing African people to use the so-called language Afrikaans, which was the Boer regime's preferred European language. And it was used to oppress African people in Azania. So it's part of the apartheid law. I spoke earlier about the anti-apartheid movement and the role of Britain and America, and in that particular case, France, in maintaining the regime's access to weapons to kind of like continue their racist acts. Well, the the Soweto uprising, which took place in June 1976, was basically students saying that, look, we are not going to follow this where you tell us we can't even speak our own language in our schools. And during that demonstration, there was a tragic loss of many innocent lives. It was actually a major turning point in the nation's struggle for liberation. It was an outrageous situation. But what they did, which is something that we don't do here, is that it inaugurated Youth Month, which runs from 1st of June to the end. And they honor the lives and many sacrifices of young people in South Africa who, and we should do the same. That's my belief. I think that young people today who are marching for Sudan, for Congo, for Palestine, for all the different conflicts in the world, and putting their careers, their liberty at risk, it should be celebrated and supported. Many of them are facing arrest, expulsion, and we must back them. They are the future. I know in my university, some students have recently been suspended for being parts of encampments. I know on Friday, there was a court case, I forget which, was it Queen Mary University is trying to remove students from the encampments. I know if they're successful, it's likely my own university, UCL, will follow suit. But these movements are being run from young people. And the reason why it's really important, I don't know if you can see the image, and I'll blow it up again on the screen, is that the image on the right will remind you that, that a few years ago, a couple of days, from today, it was a group of young people, multi-ethnic group of young people who came together in Bristol and said that statue has to go. That veneration of white supremacy in the middle of Bristol has got to go. We've exhausted every single avenue. We've done petitions, protests, we've been in debates, we've spoken to politicians. They've all said, yes, we understand, and done nothing about it. And so they just said, you know what? And they took the statue and dumped it. And their actions, which unfortunately had to be predicated by the murder of George Floyd, but their actions had a ripple effect across the whole world. where you saw roads must fall. You saw movements by many young people and people who were elders as well now started to involve by their energy to start challenging these injustices and shaping the world that we want to see. So, if we're going to close this program, and this is the final slide for this season, I want to remind ourselves that we're closing in June. I think Brother Kwaku does African Music Month in June as well, but it's also Young People's Month, Young Month. And I think we should also take that time just to honor them, remember them, and support them. They're inheriting a load of shite, where we've let them down. And, and we need to do better. So, yeah, I'm going to move on. Whew. And yes, I'll bring Sister Oleander back in as well. And just wanted to say thank you all, Brother Colin, for your research, and others who sent stories in to us. It's been a bit of a longer program. I think, we missed the 90 minutes. I mean, it was supposed to be 60 minutes. It was 90 minutes. We're not going to go for 120 minutes, but this is the last program for a while. I'll be on sabbatical until January 2025. So that's quite a while. I've been working nonstop. You don't even know how long I've been working nonstop. My voice even going. So the program will be away for a while. We would normally be back on term time, which would be in September. And so I know term 3 at the university is on Sunday, the 29th of September. That's the new academic term. But like I said, I'm going to be on sabbatical this year. I've got a lot of work to catch up on. I may, I'll talk to Sister Oleander. I may see if I'm back on that date. But if not, it will be January 25 when we're back. I'll definitely be back on that. That'll be the new academic year. But between then and now, any ideas for one-off videos, specifically July, August, let me know. I'm interested. I'm trying to work out. I know what I've got to do work-wise, but it's been lovely having you with us while we're doing this. I miss the walking and talking videos. I cycle a lot everywhere, so I'm thinking about doing some walking and talk videos, maybe a few one-offs every now and then. So if you've got some ideas, that might be useful. But while we're gone, all I want to say is please don't despair. I know I share a lot of stories that sound grim, and if that's what's going on for 2 weeks, who knows what's going to go for the next 6 months. I know things are going to get bad. I know we've got election coming up. I know that's quite horrific and scary. None of the options that are out there between the major parties are promising. And, all I can say is that, don't rely and don't expect anything from them. If you want change, if you want to help us, then, join a collective, run an organization, become part of a Pan-African organization, find someone doing something you want to do. I mean, there's always other options as well. Don't forget to support the many, many community journalists that are out there, the presenters doing their work, the people running their businesses. Look and be inspired by stories like Black Wall Street, the African Move family, and kind of like the works that we've done here, in the UK as well, to kind of like build a network of positivity. Many of you who are online are doing some amazing works. Please support each other. Sister Oleander, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say before we wrap up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say actually how proud I am of the young people, especially because they have grown up with such a lot of misinformation online, and yet somehow they've managed to kind of filter through and still, for many of them, understand the truth. And that makes me really proud that even though, yes, a lot of us have probably not done as good for our young people as we should have and as we could have, but I'm proud that they're able to see through all the nonsense and come forward and come through. And also to say thank you to you and Brother Colin and all the other community journalists for all what you do. And I'm absolutely elated that you're taking a nice long break, because you need it. You need to rest. You absolutely do. But I know you'll probably do one-off videos on a beach somewhere or something, which would be great. But yeah, that's it. That's all I have to say.
Oh,
And
give thanks.
yeah, to everybody out there, walk good and stay safe. And yeah, that's it. See you in next time.
Oh, give thanks. And you should know, I mean, it's not a break, as in it's not a holiday. I'll still be working during that time. I just won't be
I'm,
as visible.
I kind of know that.
I know you know that, but I mean, like, I'm not going to be on the beach just like with my feet up and stuff like that. But I do have some works, things I have to write and produce, and films to try and finish that I started off years ago. So there's some projects I just want to wrap up and stuff, and I can't do that while I'm doing other works. But it doesn't mean that the work won't continue, and the galley will still be keeping an eye on things as well. So give thanks, Sister Oleander, yeah. Whatever you do, please stay safe, walk good, take care of each other, love each other. And I think, unless there's any messages, I'm going to say my usual.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of emojis from Black Lives Matter, and also they go on to say thank you both. Ashe to you.
Ashe as well. And as ever, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us all. Ashe.
Ashe.